Welcome to BVTV Diner. We are thrilled to welcome an incredible guest, Angeline Boulley, the author of Firekeeper's Daughter. Her story isn't just a page-turner, it's a reflection of culture, community, and identity that dives into the heart of Indigenous culture. If you haven't read it yet, you're in for a ride. From thrilling twists to unforgettable characters, this book has captured the heart of readers everywhere. And now it's time to step into the world of Firekeeper's Daughter. Please welcome Angeline Boulley.
Oh, thank you, Miigwech. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the first question I kind of like to break the ice with. So, when did storytelling first become important to you?
From early childhood, my parents are both readers. My dad has an 8th grade education and my mom graduated high school. And every Saturday we were at the public library checking out as many books as we could haul in our little tote bags. And I was never restricted to just the children's section. So I remember hauling, big books about English royalty and roses and architecture. And so I've always just loved reading and holding that book in my hands. And so very early on.
Was there a book in your childhood that sort of maybe kind of kickstarted your love for writing?
I would say yes. It's I Am the Cheese by Robert Cormier. And that book was the first, I probably read it in third grade or 4th grade. And it was the first book I read that for children that didn't have a happy ending, that it really ended on this note of, oh, wait, there's some dark stuff that's going to happen to this boy. And that's always the book that I remember the most of wow, not every story has a happy ending.
Speaking of stories, could you walk me through your journey as an author?
Sure. So I was a senior in high school in Michigan, and I had a great idea for a story. Basically, one of my good friends wanted to set me up with the new boy in her school, and senior year, I ended up not meeting him, but a month before graduation, she said that there was a drug bust in their school. It turned out he was an undercover cop, and I just remembered thinking, wow, what if we would have met? What if we liked each other? Or what if it wasn't that he liked me, but he needed my help? And that was the idea at 18 that I thought, that would make a really cool story. And so 35 years later, it debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, Firekeeper's Daughter, which I pitched as Native Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street.
Gotta love Nancy Drew.
Yep.
Love Nancy Drew.
Yep.
So there was obviously a gap between the publication date and when you first got the idea. What happened during those 10 years for you?
Life happened, Fernanda. Life happened. I went to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. I ended up working for a tribe nearby and just had a whole career, 20 years, working in Indian education. My career took me to, working for my tribe in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, raising a family. And then I ended up in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Department of Education. And I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and write for 3 hours. And I knew the exact minute that I had to leave my house in order to commute into the district for my job at Department of Ed. And so 10 years of writing and rewriting and teaching myself how to tell a story, how to write dialogue. But then I got an agent and an incredible book deal, and two years later, that was Firekeeper's Daughter.
That sounds like a whirlwind, basically, for me.
Yeah, definitely.
So you mentioned that you worked at the Department of Education. Was there anything in your sort of like your day job that influenced anything in Firekeeper's Daughter?
A lot did. Because I would travel and go to different Native communities all across the country. And so it was, meeting teens and, talking with students about issues that were going on in their communities. And so I knew, even though my story was set in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, I knew that the issues that the teens in my story were facing were common among other reservations and urban Indian centers. And so I guess it was like getting all of this good experience, insight from Native teens.
Do you, or are you able to recall like a moment that happened during that process that you always look back on as you write?
I remember finishing one scene and feeling so good about it and walking to the metro and just kind of high-fiving myself and just, I knew that I hit it out of the ballpark with how this one act was going to end, and the writing, everything. It was just, chef's kiss, perfection. And that scene is in the book without a word changed. It just made it through all the rounds of edits and everything. So
that must feel really good, huh?
Very rewarding, yeah.
So you've obviously had to have encountered a ton of people during this journey. Is there someone in particular that you that maybe gave you advice during your 10-year path?
Well, I had never really worked with a writer's group before, so writing was always just such a solitary thing for me. But I did go to it was called Loon Song Turtle Island, and it was this writer's retreat for Native authors or Native writers wanting to become published authors. And it was organized by Cynthia Leidick-Smith, who is a young adult author for children's books and for teens. And she really just gave me this validation because I was so anxious to have other Native writers read my work and if they were gonna like it or not, or, was I just this big imposter, or just all of these feelings that I had. And for her enthusiasm and the writers that gave critique, it was the first time that I felt like I was being seen by my fellow, comrades, these Native Native writers, and that felt really good.
So speaking of being seen, since you've obviously took a long time on this book, I wanted to ask you, so why is Donis a teenager in this? Well, as you...
The inspiration story, but I could have put her in college. And she does start out, going to college. I love that summer between high school and college or military or work. I love that transition. That summer to me just seems like such an exciting time because, there's kind of this unknown. And so I just like navigating stories in that space. And then because she goes undercover, she has to be at least 18 so that she can sign a legal agreement to be a confidential informant. And so I had to place her, 18 and then about to turn 19. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the age of the character and her background and why she would participate in this undercover operation. So, but yeah, that's a really exciting time.
So for maybe our viewers or someone that is coming up to you and saying, could you just describe this book to me? How would you describe it in maybe a couple of sentences or even like a word?
I will give you the pitch that I did on Twitter, and it was Native Nancy Drew meets 21 Jump Street. When 18-year-old Donis witnesses the murder of a loved one, she must use her science geekery and knowledge about Ojibwe traditional medicines to find out who's behind a deadly drug before she loses anyone else.
So it's obviously a lot to
fit into those characters. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, how did you decide whether to hold something back or, let's say, pursue it into the book?
Well, 10 years of writing and rewriting, I would say I was able to follow any of those, rabbit holes, or the train goes off the track and you follow it and see if anything happens. And for me, I mean, that's the beauty of a first novel, is that you have all that time to explore, and really the character reveals themselves in layers. And so I'm glad it took as long as it did. I'm glad that I didn't get the first draft published, which, by the way, it was not young adult. But I'm really glad that I took the time and was able to, I think maybe my third draft, Donis, was perfect. She made all the great decisions, everything. And she was frankly really boring. So we like a messy protagonist. And so, yeah.
So, speaking of the layers, how do you sort of go about creating such a really, in my opinion, dynamic character?
I would say, like, my first couple drafts, she was me. And then realizing Donis would have to be a lot better at chemistry and math than I was. And then having her be a hockey player, and I've never played hockey a day in my life. Hockey mom, proud hockey mom, but never, yeah. So realizing that she had to become independent, and that she could be all of these things that I'm not. But if I did my research well and had really good beta readers with that expertise in whatever area, that I could write a really credible, nuanced character. So it took time and research, and the help of friends who were beta readers, and yeah.
Were there any friends that kind of gave you some advice that you kind of took to heart, or maybe impacted the way the story ended up maybe changing? Or
yeah, I had a draft where, if you've ever seen the movie The Pelican Brief by John Grisham, or read the book, it's this mystery of who's killing these U.S. Supreme Court justices. And then right smack dab in the middle is this, like, almost like an essay or a report about pelicans being this endangered species. And it's all part of, like, this lawsuit and things like that. And, like, that's actually the motivation for the villain. And it's the main character's a law school student that did this. Well, anyway, I tried to Pelican Brief a chapter and go into the history of the FBI and investigations and crystal meth. And my best friend Barb read it, and she was like, "What the H is this chapter? It's so boring and dry. Am I reading a textbook now?" And I kept trying to justify it and make it more palatable. And she's like, why are you dumping this academic information? And so that was advice I really took to heart. And so, yeah, that helped.
Palatability is definitely a difficult nuance to balance. How did you manage to do it? Because this book does dive a lot into the culture and into other things as well. So how do you go about it?
So there's always the best is lived experience. And so, I spent summers with my grandparents growing up in Sault Ste. Marie and on Sugar Island, even though my dad, we were raised downstate, so about a 7-hour drive away from our tribal community. But I lived and worked in my community for about 12 years when my kids were school age. So, reconnecting with cousins and being involved in tribal activities and working for my tribe, those were all things why I wanted to set the story there. And so I could actually drive the route that Donis runs and know that it was 6 miles, that I could do all of these things and know, I have one funny anecdote of my son was playing hockey. It was a practice, and I was waiting for him, and I decided I was going to wait in the car. And then I was at a point thinking about story, and would a dead body fit in a car trunk, and how would I describe it? And so I popped the trunk of our car, and I got inside and curled up like a shrimp, and tribal police came by, and they're like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, kind of that thing of, I'm acting. It was like, I'm writing, I'm doing research. So those kinds of experiences were pretty fun. But then there's the academic research that you do. So reading about crystal meth, reading about all of these different things. And then there's the subject matter interviews that I love doing. So when I was living in Washington, D.C., I became friends with this man who, he's from Blackfeet Nation, and he was a retired FBI agent, special agent. And so once we established trust, I could ask him anything about FBI investigations. And that was so helpful. And then, as we're winding down and I have less questions for him, he said, "Hey, I got a buddy who's a retired IRS agent. Do you want to learn about money laundering?" And I was like, "Well, yes, I would." And so you have to balance your research. So that primary research of your lived experience, then this academic research, and then this subject matter expert interviews, so that you really are writing stories that are, and characters that are plausible, they're credible, they seem familiar to you. Like the number of readers that are like, "Oh, this character, Granny June, she's exactly like my grandmother." And, that's what you want as a writer. James Joyce wrote that in the particular we find the universal. And that's what a great story does, is it can be about a very specific community that you've never heard of or heard anything about. But the characters and the story, the conflict, that's universal. And we can see ourselves reflected in those characters.
What were some things you for sure wanted to sort of be a mirror for yourself and maybe your background in your book that you kind of...
What I really, so any community, I've lived and worked in a couple of different tribal communities, and every community I've worked in, there have been strong Native women that just took me under their wings and made me a better person. And I remember my first job working for this tribe, and there were two sisters. They also worked for the tribe, and I wanted to be just like them. I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, and they were a little bit older. They wanted me to date their brother, which I was all okay with. But I was like, I want to be like them, but I'm such a mess. I'm just a mess. I'll never be like them. But then the more that we got to know each other, they would tell me their stories, and I realized that when they were my age, they were just as messed up as I was, and that there was hope for me to become the strong Nishkwe, the strong Native woman that I really wanted to be. So that was an important part of Donis's journey too, is to really get guidance from other women, and to really have that shape her and help her through the journey that she goes through.
Aww. So you've obviously looked back fondly on these strong women in your life. Is there something that you hope that maybe the readers of your book are able to look back on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a voracious reader, and the books that stay with you, the stories, the characters that stay with you. What I would hope is for, people to love Donis and to be cheering her on, and that's what any author wants, is for characters to be memorable.
Because I know that there's definitely some scenes in there I'm not forgetting that anytime soon. So, I think I've told you before, I am a writer. So is there anything that maybe you would give, any advice that you would give me or someone else that's also a writer, an aspiring writer, any input or any advice you could give us?
Absolutely. So my first time through the process of getting published, I would stress over every single deadline, and it wasn't until my second book and going through that editorial process that I realized spend your energy where it matters. So when you're writing a first draft, don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about punctuation. That's not where your energies need to be. Time spent perfecting a first draft is wasted time, because a first draft, its sole purpose for existing is to get the bones of the plot down, so that you have some foundation to build on with subsequent drafts. So then with your second draft, you're looking more at, fleshing out characters, maybe exploring subplots. It's really not until you're working with an editor on, I don't worry about grammar or anything, even though I'm good at it. So it's a skill I have. So it's not like I'm turning in phonetics, hieroglyphics, but spend the energy where it counts. And so it isn't until that final round when your third or fourth draft is going to the copy editors at the publishing house that's where you pay attention to grammar and word choice and realizing that you know nothing of the English language. And but yeah, so that really helped me, because I am a perfectionist, so I want my first draft I want my publisher to just be wowed by my first draft. But that's spending too much time on the wrong focus. So that's what I would say is understand that writing is a process. Writing is rewriting, and to carefully put the focus and energy where it's going to mean the most.
How do you go about balancing, like when you're in this writing groove and then you suddenly hit like a roadblock? How do you go about that?
Well, what I would do for a writer's block, there's kind of like your typical writer's block. And, so you go for a bike ride, hang out with the cats, just kind of free your mind and then try to come back to it. If that doesn't work, then what I do is I look at what scene I last wrote, why I'm stuck on the next scene, and then jumping over that unknown scene completely and picking up the story for the next scene that I know for sure. And I'm excited to write that. And a lot of times, that was a big lesson to me, is that you don't have to write your story in a linear fashion. It does not. You don't have to write the chronological story. You can jump back and forth, and a lot of times if you do jump forward and you're writing this chapter that's going to come later in the book, it really helps you to figure out, oh, okay, so I just have to figure out how to get from the chapter I just wrote to the chapter that's going to happen down the road, and that makes it easier to do. If that doesn't work, I ask myself, what truth am I afraid of telling?
Speaking of truths, do you remember any times in your life or in your book's life that maybe was it challenged, or was it maybe banned? Because there's a lot of topics in this book that don't always sit well with readers.
Right. My book has been banned. There's a consensual sex scene, and it gets banned for that, but there's also a sexual assault, and it does not get banned for that. So you riddle me that, how that makes sense. And my book got banned in a high school that was about 20 miles away from where I live, and I almost went to their school board meeting. I grew up in this little town, and after with the pandemic, I moved back to that little town. So I wanted to show up and be like, we used to play you in sports. Why are you banning my book? Like, do you know how much a book like this would have meant to me in high school? But it was purely adults imposing agenda on students while claiming they were preventing students from being indoctrinated by books that expose them to scary issues. But it's like a young adult author is taking such care to present difficult topics in the most sensitive, respectful way with regard for their youngest reader. We can't protect our children from the ills of society. So what better place for a student, for a reader to have that experience reading this story than, yeah. So to me, a book is the safest thing for a young person to read, because it's showing how another person, another character would go through a circumstance. And, you know, you always give your reader some breathing room. You don't trauma pile on top of them, like you're taking care of that.
Now this is going to be like a random, maybe off-topic question, but it's a good question in my opinion. Do you have any projects you're currently working on? I know you just released your third book, fall of last year, 2025.
Yes.
And so are you working on anything new, or is it secret, or how should we know?
I am working on my fourth book, and if you look at my books, they each focus on a different element. So Element of Fire with Firekeeper's Daughter. My second book, Warrior Girl, Unearthed, Element of Earth. So it's about repatriating our ancestors. I pitched it as indigenous or native Lara Croft, but instead of raiding tombs, she's raiding museums to bring back ancestral remains. And my third book that came out last September, Sisters in the Wind, is about Native teens that are in foster care, and kind of do they find their way back home or not. And my fourth book, Element of Water. So it's, I'm working on it now. If I meet all of my publishing deadlines, it'll be out this time next year. And it opens at a pipeline protest rally at the Mackinac Bridge.
Huh. I'm looking forward to that book, since I'm going to be reading, hopefully by this next week, the sequel to Firekeeper's Daughter. So I'm so excited to know that in a year's time, hopefully, that I'll be able to read the series.
Yeah. And my books really, like Firekeepers is the best place to start. But the other two books, you can read them out of order.
It was so nice to talk to you, Angeline.
Fernanda, very nice to talk with you.
Thank you, Angeline, for joining us here at BVTV Diner and for writing stories like Firekeeper's Daughter. We shared stories that remind us of the power of truth, community, and identity. We are the strength we find in one another and the importance of knowing who we are, especially when the world tries to tell us differently. Until next time, we meet at the diner. Take care and goodbye.